IVM.
Hi everybody, just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to All Things Policy. I am Suyash Desai. Today we are here to talk about Russia-Japan relations. Pacific Russia is barely mentioned in the contemporary Indo-Pacific strategic discourse. However, geographically and conceptually, Russian regions like Sakhalin and Kuril Islands are key to the stability of Sea of Japan littoral. Japan is a key player in the Indo-Pacific framework and always has a seat on the table, but its engagement with the northern neighbor Russia is often not highlighted, let alone the relations with India and what role India can play in this relationship. My colleague here at the Takshashila institution tracks this relationship, and he is joining us today to speak about a recent set of recommendations that he has made in an opinion piece in the Hindustan Times online. So welcome Aditya Pareek. I welcome you to this podcast.
Thank you, Suyash. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let us start with the basic question. You've argued for India to be a novel mediator between Russia and Japan. Can you tell us why you have argued that?
So the main reason is to pursue a wedge strategy where we're trying to decouple Russia and China in pursuit of the Indian national interest. Because peace and cooperation between Russia and Japan will be a watershed in our efforts to bring Russia away from China's proverbial orbit. If you look at the amount of investment Japan has pursued in the Asia-Pacific region, you'll find that it far dwarfs in real terms China's efforts with the BRI. The difference is since Japan is our ally and the West's ally, we rarely see it highlighted in the press owing to the sensationalism mindset of the Western press. Unfortunately, the same can't be said about Japan's investment in Russia, especially investment in the Russian Far East. You'll recall that we've mentioned this on this podcast before, that this was a major strategy of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who tried to secure the return of some Kuril Islands with economic leverage. So Abe was trying to secure the return of a few Kuril Islands out of the four that Japan claims. So this was his plan that they were to channel the economic leverage that they can get over Russia by offering them economic cooperation. And this was, I think, championed in the leverage that would have come from the 8-point economic cooperation plan that Shinzo Abe proposed to President Putin and they tried to follow. So in this sort of environment, I think only a mediating partner, which is seen as unbiased and a close ally by both sides, can move things forward and maybe help Russia and Japan fix their relationship. This is where I think India can play the central role of the mediator, which is seen by both sides as this trustworthy partner, this unbiased partner, which is pretty much non-partisan to both sides.
That's very interesting, Aditya, because my next question is going to be on India. So what was the trigger that led you to make these recommendations? Because India's engagement with Russia and Japan is almost 70 years old. Why does this only make now? What is the key trigger point for you recommending this now?
So in my opinion, it only makes sense now because of several factors. But to be quite honest, I can't really speak before my time, when I wasn't alive. So I can only read the history. I can't really talk about the nitty-gritties of those times because I can't firsthand experience that. So from what I understand in recent times, Shinzo Abe's outreaches to Russia were unprecedented. No Japanese leader before him or now in the future is likely to extend a hand to Russia to make economic or political concessions like that. There is this general sense in Japanese socio-political sphere. There's this cognitive dissonance kind of that despite to bending the knee, they've significantly offered so much outreach to Russia, but they got nothing tangible in return. And the cognitive dissonance part comes in when they still insist that we are going to keep engaging with Russia on the territorial dispute on the northern territories, as the Kuril Islands are called in that country, in Japan. So they don't really appreciate the reality that, hey, it's Russian territory since post World War II. And that's the reality on the ground. They still claim that they have sovereignty over the islands, which is in all practical purposes just not true. Russia completely controls the islands, and there's a really little chance that they will ever get that back. There is, as I said, Japanese private enterprise, talking about them because economic relations is, I would say, the second biggest pillar apart from diplomacy in this relationship. So, Japanese private enterprise is also very skeptical about investing in Russia because of two main reasons, as far as I understand. The first one is that Japanese companies are not very amenable to working under Russian national law. They would rather operate in an environment where international law applies to them when they do business in Russia. But Russia has insisted only Russian national law is the only way they can operate in Russian territory. And this includes the Kuril Islands. And the second reason is these Japanese companies are also afraid of suffering losses, financial losses, by being caught in the crossfire of existing or potentially future Western sanctions that may be imposed on Russia. So if they do business in Russia with Russian entities, they might get caught in that crossfire. So that's problematic for them. And because of this, not much economic cooperation in the private enterprise space has materialized from Japan's side in Russian territory. So recently, Russia has revealed a new regime of tax breaks and a free customs zone on the Kuril Islands. And they've invited all countries, including Japan, but not exclusively Japan, unlike Abe's 8-point cooperation plan was talking about. That's why. The Eastern Economic Forum is ongoing. It started yesterday on the 2nd of September when we are recording this podcast. So the potential trilateral meeting between Russia, Japan, and India is something I'm looking forward to during this AEF. So there has been some track to engagement already between the three countries this year, organized by ICWA, Indian Council of World Affairs, which, as we know, is a major think tank in India, government-funded think tank. But the details of that meeting, which were communicated, really gives me this very trade-centric, very transactional sort of business that we need to invest and facilitate the flow of coal, energy, etc. From the Russian Far East. So the focus was very transactional and business-like in that. I don't think that a broader strategic approach was taken there. So my biggest argument here is that India's approach to this trilateral track with Russia and Japan should be magnanimous and not really very narrow, transactional, very tactical. It should be very strategic.
Okay, that's very interesting, Aditya. But before we move on to our next question, I would like to take a small break. Folks, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. Postcards from Nowhere completes its 100th episode. Utsav speaks with Chuck, the host of Getting Meta, Origin of Things, Simplified, amongst others, about slow travel, the evolution of Postcards from Nowhere, and what drives him to travel. Tune in and discover the new manifesto of the show and get a glimpse of what's in store for the coming weeks. On The Habit Coach, Ashton talks about the art of focusing with our eyes and how it's connected with our daily activities. On Echoes of India, Anirudh brings back to life the history of South Asia through his extensively researched narratives. And on Simplified, our four hosts, Chuck, Naren, Shriketh, and Tony, attempt to deconstruct these universal birthday rituals on the occasion of Chuck's birthday. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week on the network, Fiat Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and Intuit India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back, folks. We are discussing a prospective mediation by India in the Russia-Japan relations. So my next question, Aditya, to you is on read your recommendations only. Have you come across similar recommendations before? So put simply, is there similar literature which our listeners can dig deep into on the same topic?
Well, I'm glad you brought this up. The only other commentary I've come across, even addressing India vis-a-vis Russia-Japan relations or the Kuril Islands issue, was an opinion piece by Ambassador Krishnan Srinivasan. He's the former Foreign Secretary of India. We'll link it in the description slash show notes. So, thing to note is his article came out in January 2019, if I recall correctly, when Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's 8-point economic cooperation plan and diplomacy and outreaches were in full swing towards Russia. So, Ambassador Srinivasan argued for lessons to be learned in the India Pakistan relationship from the example of Russia and Japan engaging over their territorial dispute. So, he asked for lessons to be learned for the Kashmir situation. It's definitely a great read, and I do recommend you read to Ambassador Srinivasan's article too. But since the facts on the ground have changed in the Russia-Japan relationship itself, there is little we can learn from them vis-a-vis Kashmir now, because ultimately things didn't pan out the way they were looking back then.
That's very interesting. We'll surely link that article along with yours in the show notes, Aditya. My final question to you is a set of interrelated questions. First, how likely do you think that the Russia Japan relationship will improve and a peace will be concluded between the two? That's one. Or two is how likely is that the wedge strategy or the counterbalancing, as it is preferred to be called in IR literature, to bring Russia out of China's orbit will play out as you have intended or projected to argue?
So, in answer to the first part of the question, well, that is my hope that the Russia Japan relationship would improve. But as an IR analyst, I don't think it will happen without significant material and security factors and the situation changing in Pacific Russia, Sea of Japan region. Because Russia sees the Kuril Islands as imperative to its navy's access to open waters of the Pacific Ocean. It can't be denied that if Japan gets even one or two of the islands back, Russian military might may be significantly limited in securing their territory and interests, both regionally and globally. This is in regards to the shipping lanes connecting the Russian Far East to the mainland of Russia. The Soya and the Sugaru Straits being blocked is also a threat that the Russian Navy feel that they've been inflicted with if Japan builds a military base there and, God forbid, invites US forces over, the US Navy over. So that's going to be a problem because the Sea of Ox and the Pacific Ocean, the safe transit passages there would be potentially inaccessible to the Russian. So it's really something very geostrategic there. There's the potential precision strike missiles under the Pacific Deterrence Initiative of the USS Indo-PACOM, which is being contemplated right now, which will position these aforementioned conventional strike missiles in Japan, meant for deterrence against China, but which can also target Russia because of their range. So, to answer the second part of the question, how likely is it that the counterbalancing to bring Russia out of China's orbit will play out as I intend or have projected in my views? So, well, my idea is not to achieve 100% decoupling all of a sudden or a split between Russia and China all of a sudden. That's an unrealistic best case scenario, which is unlikely to happen instantaneously. So, it's not a 2-minute noodle kind of a thing. So no matter what we try, that's just not going to happen. It's not making noodles. It's really something a very serious geostrategy. We should be looking at small cracks in the relationship. Our focus should be increment, wedge by wedge. We can separate them since their alliance is very non-binding, tentative, and based on individual interests of both states, Russia and China. So their individual interests, especially economic interests of both parties, come first before this pragmatic alliance of theirs, which is very non-binding belief. I agree that Russia in the short term will be drawn to China, as most people predict these days. That Dragon Bear hashtag has been pretty prevalent on Twitter, you might have noticed. And China is needed for Russia because they need to counterbalance the United States and its allies with the strategic weight that China brings in. But there are several small fishes, as I just alluded, that I can point that tell you it's not as if there is no decoupling possible at all. For example, I recently wrote another article for Asia Times, which will also link in the description / show notes, about how the Russian Far East fisheries industry is being inflicted with a quasi trade war by China. Almost 60% of Russian fisheries was supplied to China in recent years, but in October 2020, as early as October 2020, they just stopped accepting shipments from the Russian Far East of fish, mainly pollock. And the reason they give overtly is because of COVID concerns. Now, if India and Japan were to buy this fish from Russia, boom, you have a wedge to exploit and gain leverage over in this relationship, which you can exercise to draw Russia away from China. So things like these will make a difference, no matter how small. Over time, they would make a difference. This will be a significant difference, so using which we can gain leverage and bring our ally Russia out of our adversary China's orbit.
Thanks, Aditya. That is very, very interesting. As you have already highlighted, not much Indian focus or Indian strategic community's focus is on this area. And I hope that your article in Hindustan Times acts as opening of a floodgate for more and more researchers to follow this area. Thank you. Thank you so much, Aditya. And we will surely include the link of Aditya's article in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and do tune in for more All Things Policy. Thank you.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takstashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
Come learn and experience the ABCDs of being queer with me, Shinetro,
and me, Farhad,
on our show Gay BCD.
The two of us take you through our stories and experiences of being gay men in the city of Mumbai and have candid
and sometimes downright scandalous
conversations about sexuality, gay culture, and everything in between.
Catch new episodes of Gay BCD every Tuesday on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get all your podcasts from.
Don't you think that if everyone around you is getting smart, you better be smarter? Hey there, I'm the traveling professor Siddharth Deshmukh, and I'm back with season 2 of my podcast to make you smarter. Smarter with Sid. What's this season's focus about? Well, it's about 10-minute nuggets that will make you stand out at work. It's time to go from smart to smarter. Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday and become smarter with Sid.